It's supposed to start with Southern strategy, but I'm actually not going to get to the Southern strategy until tomorrow. I know, we got to fight in New York. And so, a couple things. First off, if you were gone tomorrow, was anyone gone? I mean, anyone gone yesterday? In here? I think we're all here yesterday. So everyone has a review list for the test. I'm still hoping the test will be Thursday, but it kind of looks like it's going to have to be tomorrow. Sound good?
I'm not okay with that.
It might have to be Friday. If I don't quite get there, I'm sorry about being Friday, but that's it. We can do it Monday. Everyone loves Monday tests.
Yeah, that's
Actually, we don't want Monday. So, what's that? Calendar? Or my phone? Okay, away. All right. So, let's go ahead then and take out. So, the test, I'm still looking at Thursday, but it might be Friday. I do have one more little thing to read, and I'll also have one more thing tomorrow, but in the second page of that, right behind the fornication laws, there's a few paragraphs. It's an excerpt from Common Sense. Common Sense was Thomas Paine's great work, and it's very much like the Declaration of Independence. So I'd like you to read it. The big thing is, as you read it, you know, his justifications will be similar. Notice how he writes in a more colloquial form, more like the way people actually spoke. So he was writing it for regular people, to his point of view. So I can see your good. And so it's really, it's actually pretty cool. I like Common Sense a lot, so I just want to give an excerpt to read. So these few paragraphs are on that page. Thank you. Next, we have a little explanation of the Declaration of Independence. Did we get to unalienable rights?
Yeah.
What was that philosophy where?
Yes, we got to that.
What's deism?
It's belief in the deity or God that provides knowledge.
And what do they call him? Like
The
the creator and like a clockmaker. And from who really kind of triggered this idea? What scientists? Yeah, Isaac Newton. If you could have a mathematical formula for the universe, then it makes sense that the deity created everything and then sat back and watched. Watched the creation go. And what that means is we're all on our own. Exactly. We have free will. We can make mistakes, but also correct those. We can't blame anybody but ourselves. That's both good and bad, isn't it? But that's what a deist believes. And by definition, a true deist is not a Christian. Christianity is an interactive God. And most of the founding fathers were, if not full-fledged deists like Thomas Jefferson, they were very much influenced by deists. You know, George Washington never used anything but the creator, never would say the word God. Because to him it was a creator. And so, that's deism. For equality, what two things? Equality under what? Equality under and equality of. And what philosopher came up? Well, Thomas Jefferson wrote it, Locke. And where did they get the cannon from that they put around Boston for the British to flee? Ticonderoga, which also makes? Well, no, a fine name for youths. You have children. Youths. Yes, I said that. Youths. Read the manual. And then, how did the king respond to the olive branch petition?
To scare them. Will tear out your intestines and quarter you and capture you.
We're gonna take you commit treason.
Don't do that at home.
There you go.
And so that one, yeah, it's not as fun as you think.
Are you going to bring it around?
That would be fun. We got a stock. Like I think did I say this yesterday? Make a great assembly. But I might go to that one. All right, so with that, we have unalienable rights. Let's get the rights. In fact, I scrawled them down last period and left them up for your dining and dancing entertainment. So these are the three rights, unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now you notice they're not specific laws. You can do this, 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 and this is your right. You can turn right on red, cross at a crossing. I don't know. And do other stuff, walking and driving related, pre-driving cars. But these three rights, we got to get to what they are, because they're very abstract. What we're talking about here is a philosophical ideal of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and therefore, societal structure should be to guarantee these rights. So what is life?
Yes. The life you
What is life?
Living.
42.
Plants?
42.
You've been kicked out.
Uh,
What is life?
42.
40.
42.
Yeah, life,
University of Oh, that's the answer.
What's the question?
The question.
Okay, so what is life in this context? Because I have no idea what you're talking about, and now I'm already.
Please dive into the
Yeah, exactly.
What's that?
Would it be the right to be able to like control your own life?
That's it. Because slaves are alive, plants are alive, cattle's alive, but controlling your own life. What's the word for that? What's another word for free will? A slave, you're relying on somebody else. Independence, which means the same thing, but just independence. So, life means independence. It's more than just being alive. Going back to that one thing I kept referring to. Slaves are alive, but they don't have life. Independent. What's liberty? Another one of those. We all hear liberty, so know what it is. Yes.
Freedom. Freedom to do what you want.
Not freedom to do what you want. Because you can't do whatever you want. Because we might want to do something and realize, maybe I better not do that. You know, I want to roam through the halls and steal money from freshmen. Yeah, as fun as that might be, something inside me says that would be the wrong thing to do. Yes.
Freedom to make your own choices.
So, what decides for you? What inside you will kind of be your ethical or moral? Let's hope you have those things. Your conscience. Freedom of conscience. Freedom of conscience. Which is kind of what you're getting to. That idea, you know, what decides right or wrong? Because you think about laws. You obey laws not because there's a law. You make a rational decision. You weigh the options to decide whether or not you obey the law. You're weighing the consequences, weighing what's right and wrong, and it's up to you to decide that. Like, I don't steal money from freshmen. So people are watching. And but who drives to school? Maybe go 26 and not 25. Yeah, none of you would do that, but other periods have done that. You've made a conscious decision that, you know, I want to get there a little bit faster, so I will put other people at risk and drive faster. You like layers of that. But we all make those decisions from everything. It's what's inside us. And if you take the idea of a deist, that makes perfect sense. It's us. We decide. And lastly, what's the pursuit of happiness? That's an R. My R's are always very just unique.
They're just kind of like a line.
Yeah, sometimes that's an R for me too. That's a pretty good R. It deals with opportunity. It really does. Actually, it has a. What did John Locke say? Pursuit of life, liberty, and property was the most important land, or most important property, but property is basically anything you can own, what you have. But land is what everyone thought of. So property could be wealth or something to that effect. And pursuit of property expands on that, but let's get to property first as a right. Because when Locke was sitting there talking about property, he was talking about what if you live in a tyrannical state, a tyranny, where someone with absolute control, a despot, and they can take away your property, what you have, how you make a living, how you survive anytime they want. Arbitrarily just take what you have, and you have no recourse. So somebody with power can just come and take away your stuff. And there's not a thing you can do about it. And give it to somebody else, keep it, maybe give it back, maybe not. How would you live? Huh? No, say it again. Are you really independent anymore? Do you have freedom of conscience? If you don't, you might say something, and arbitrarily, they'll come and take your phone now. And you don't even know what it is. Can you plan for the future? think about how you will act. What are you gonna do to make sure I don't steal your stuff? It's gonna off on you. You hide it, you'll be in worse trouble. Actually, that's kind of the way despots work. You hide it, then you'll be punished. Now you just lose your stuff.
You just do.
But don't own it.
You'll act the way you think I want you to act. Like a slave. Does that make sense? Because you don't want me to steal your stuff. And that was property and why John Locke said property is one of the most important rights. Now there's a problem. What if you don't have property? You still have these rights. And then there's some vague areas, and that's why they expanded it. So property, the idea of property, be able to own property and control it, will give you the true ability to enjoy your life, the true ability to enjoy your happiness. If you control property. And one more thing about that. To Jefferson's point of view, when Jefferson was looking at the world, and we are pre-capitalism, pre-industrial revolution, in fact, it's literally just beginning in Britain at this time, we got little elements of proto-capitalism, but he looked at people and he said, even if you're not technically a slave, if you work for a wage, you're a slave, and therefore will not enjoy your rights. Because you never really own the property because you have to work for somebody else. You don't have freedom of conscience because you got to do what someone else says, or you don't have a way to survive. And you're not independent because they control you. To Jefferson, if you were for a wage or a slave, a wage slave. When the Industrial Revolution was just beginning in the United States, Jefferson was pretty old then. Think about 1820, nearing the end. He was terrified. Absolutely terrified of the wage system. By the way, that should tell you something. All of us hear that, like, of course we're going to go earn a wage. It's already do earn a wage. And now we accept that loss of freedom as normal. It's pretty amazing. We'll talk about that. They literally had to beat people into submission to accept that. Fun times in the 19th century. But one more thing. What's your most valuable piece of property that applies to this? What's the most valuable thing all of you own? Every one of you own at least some. Now it's not the same. It's something similar. Some have money, some don't. Yes. What about yourself is valuable? Did you say that too? I didn't hear you. Sorry. I'm ignoring you. Huh? Your skills, and that's actually true. Your abilities, your potential is your most important, most valuable skill. Your most valuable piece of property is what you can do, or the potential of what you can do. And that's why everybody is different. Yeah, it might lead to money, it might lead to other things, but that is the most valuable thing you have. So what is the pursuit of happiness? To use your skills, your ability, your potential to do what? To go as far as they can take. That's that whole opportunity thing that you mentioned. Yeah, be a great motivation. Please have one moment. But think about it for a second. That's the most valuable thing all of you have. And the pursuit of happiness is taking it as far as your abilities take you. And not everyone's going to be the same. And it might not be what you want. What you want in your abilities might not match, and people are different. But that was the whole idea of it. If we have a system where there won't be roadblocks in the way, and yeah, I could argue there are roadblocks today. But it's certainly in a way better than it was before. Things are complex. But you can go as far as your abilities take you as long as you don't do what?
Break the law.
Huh?
Break the law.
Don't think about breaking the law, because remember, breaking the law, that's a matter of conscience. But you're on the right track, as long as you don't do what? Wait. Infringe on other people's rights. You know, what if my greatest skill was literally to walk through the streets and beat people up and steal everything they have? That'd be infringing on their rights, wouldn't it? No matter how good it was, how good I was at that. And what skill set to have? As long as you don't infringe on other people's rights. And that's the key. Define that. And that's really hard to define. And that's where we get the complexities of laws, and sometimes they don't work. Or you get one laws that might seem like they're going to help you, and then they actually only have one group and infringe on your rights. Those are the rights. And hopefully when you see that, now life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, you know what Jefferson was thinking. You know what the founding state or the founding document of the United States meant when it said rights. Because life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness just seemed, sure, whatever. Pursuit of happiness sounds kind of useless in a way. So let's get to number 3. The third thing we need to know, the social contract. And the social contract, okay, John Locke did not come up with this phrase. There's another philosopher that I don't like named Rousseau. But the social contract is this contract between the people and the government. And remember that whole thing about natural laws? This is the idea that maybe people can come up with these laws, an agreement. People will give up a little bit to a protection of certain things. That is the contract. And basically what the whole thing about the Declaration of Independence is saying that we have equality. We have rights, but Britain broke the contract. They broke the contract. That's the grievances, how they broke the contract. So let's get to this really quick. I will read it here. Hyphen. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the government. 2 big things in one sentence. Why is there government? If we create government, there's a contract. What's the government side of it? What are, exactly. Governments have one reason. Government to secure rights. Government secure rights. What's the other thing? That's an E. Right? That's pretty clear, right?
That's an L.
That's an E.
What is it?
It's
Next,
now it's just
deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So who has the power? The people have the power. The people allow government to function. So, yeah.
So it's basically like a grounds for democracy.
Not a true democracy, but what in America will consider to be a democracy where the people have power. Because a true democracy is where the people make every decision. And
So it's something.
say it again.
It's something like just for everyone.
Yeah. But this whole thing of the social contract, in the 1830s in the United States, that would come to mean democracy. The people have the power. Now, there's another word for power that fits here, and we'll use it. Sometimes I might just use it and not realize it.
People.
the people.
I was busy. The word is sovereignty. The people are sovereign. Sovereign means they have the ultimate power. Now, I know what you're saying. You might be thinking, wait a minute, a dictatorship, a tyrant. Do the people give them power? Yeah. The people allow them to govern. And you think, wait a second, if people resist, the despot will shoot them. Who's shooting? They're other people. And so the point is, people might not necessarily agree when the right time to rebel is, but also the people are ultimately sovereign. And so what happens is this. People will give up a little bit of their power to government to secure rights. And therefore, the only reason for government is to protect rights. There's no other reason for government. And you say, wait a minute, what about all these other things that government does? Everything else is a subsidiary of rights, at least according to the document that gave the philosophical backing of the United States of America. So let's get to the next thing. That whenever any form of government becomes instructed to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter and abolish it and institute new government. I can't help it. Whenever I see capital, I want to yell it. Government laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Huh? I got tired. If government infringes on rights, what? The government should be changed. So, if government infringes on rights, that's an N. That's an R. The people must change it. The people must change the government. Now, I didn't say rebel, because it might just be in a republic you change the leaders. It might be change the Constitution. It might be change laws. Or it might be rebellion. But the point is that government's infringing on rights. But now, define infringing on rights. And what's infringing on some people's rights might be not that big of a deal to somebody else. I mean, this is really complex. And he kind of lays that out. Prudence and need will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. You can't just change it when you're just mad about it. There's got to be a real reason, especially one that's been the government and protecting rights for a long time. And I forgot where we're at. Oh, and accordingly, all experience hath shewn that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves from by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. There could be some areas where you think rights are being infringed, but people can suffer through a lot. That's the point. Maybe that's not the best time, and maybe not everyone is suffering. But here's the key moment that I lost. By the way, remember what I said? No dictionary. Shewn. I wish they still had shewn. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, usurping powers, or like taking a power by basically the government taking rights, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. And that's the last thing. It's the duty of the people to do this. There's nobody else. If the people are sovereign, then they're the one to do it. And if a government does infringe rights, the last thing that will ever happen, ever, is that government giving up their power and giving your rights back. They don't do that. They have to be pushed. And so, it is your duty. Here's the thing. If it's your duty to know whether or not your rights are being infringed, or other rights are being infringed, and that might affect you, once one person's rights are taken away, it makes it easier to take away other people's rights. You have to be what?
Educated.
You have to be vigilant. You have to know what's going on. You have to be aware. Remember what I told you? I kind of said about, talked a little bit about paying attention, knowing what's going on, how people can fool you. He was talking about that in the Declaration of Independence. If you don't know what's going on, the odds are they're using that against you. Let me rephrase that. They're using that against you. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. If you don't protect your rights, nobody else will. And that's what Jefferson was warning about. That's why he laid out the grievances there. Some are kind of ridiculous, but he listed out all these reasons. See, the king did this, the king did this, the king did this, the king did this. We are justified. We are right. Yeah.
Talk about some grievances that he wrote down. He wrote some of the way he wrote it, he made it seem like the king himself came over to America and burned the houses down.
Yeah, the king burned houses down, the king searched and see. Remember I told you about that? I mentioned that originally they wrote down that Parliament did these. How are you going to get mad at Parliament? But the tyrant. And that's why they did that. Now tomorrow we're going to read one more little bit, one of the grievances.
Is that what the common sense was? It was like they were talking about how King George is responsible for everything.
And that's kind of it. And basically what they're saying there in reality, it's not so much the king, it's that form of government you allowed. Focus on the king. And we'll get to one more thing because we'll read that draft. We'll do that tomorrow in class. Oh yeah, blame the king for everything. It's ridiculous. They blame the king for every single problem in the colonies. Why? Hey, once we start, let's just keep going. Yeah, they're being a little duplicitous too. This is a political document too. So they want to persuade people. And then we created what? The colonies became what? States. And they became the United States of America. But it really wasn't clear exactly what they created. To this day, it's still not really clear. They've got a little war over this. You might have heard of it, called the Civil War. We're not sure what we created yet, and it's still here today.
So like, if there were only 13 colonies with the states, how did they get to other states? How did
We'll
they-
get to it. Yeah. And that actually was a big controversy. Big controversy. You know, expand the states, with the states coming as equals. So, that's the Declaration of Independence. What date did the United States declare independence? And war's over, right? So then we moved on to form a new form of government, then Vietnam, right? So, let's get to the Tonkin Gulf Resolution. We're just gonna skip the rest of it. No problem, right? Independence, war over, right? British left Boston, right? It's over, correct?
No.
Then World War I, yeah. Only if it wants to. So, up here in Halifax, while this is going on, almost 300 British ships, over 30,000 British troops are waiting for the storms to die down. When they declared independence, they're just starting to set out to attack. They didn't know. Washington had a pretty good idea they were going to come. But they declared independence. Remember this euphoria, we won, and if we're going to die anyways, let's commit treason and go for it. Where did they attack? Boston, they figure is too crazy. Where?
New York.
New York. And now we have to write New York. Because all hell broke loose. Within a month and a half, it looked like the whole thing was over. That's how fast. Boom, it's done. New York. And the battles around New York. So everybody write down New York, Long Island, and I drew one on an overhead for you. I drew it, so it's pretty good. I had a little more time. The hard part was getting the letters square.
What is that?
Oh,
You were letting off.
just keep it up there.
Can't see it.
What?
I like the overhead so I can put it on the board and draw on it. And actually, because I have it. I drew this up for you real quick. Pretty good, huh?
You literally see the pages that are
I did that for you. You're welcome. All right, so here's New York Harbor. This is all people now. Well, and buildings. Manhattan Island, New York was just on the tip then, about 15,000 people. Long Island, just a few farms, really rugged here, low mountains, lots of little passes, little valleys. This is all farmland. Staten Island was just a big rock. Here's New Jersey. This is the Hudson River. And if you go to New York City, they'll talk about the Hudson, and then they'll mention this strait, and they'll call it the East River. It's not a river. It's the strait between Manhattan Island and Long Island. But they'll say the East River all the time. If you've been there, ready about New York City, they say East River. But it's ocean. And Washington knew they were going to attack New York. He actually went down there, but he has almost no army. He has a couple, maybe 3,000 kind of trained troops, but not quite to the level of the British. And then another 6,000 or 7,000 are militia. But what did militia always do? Run. They're a real disadvantage. And one thing you have to get here, before we write down just very briefly about the New York battles, Washington did not yet understand how to win the war. He's going to make so many tactical and strategic errors. He did not yet understand. Washington's going to lose most of the battles he fights. But what do the colonists have to do to win? Yeah, survive and stay in the fight. They got to survive, and they have to stay in the fight. And they got to show that they are still resisting. But Washington, and that means the most important of the armies, Washington's. If Washington's army is destroyed in 1776, The revolution is done. And it almost happened. And the other problem is this. New York's on an island. How do you get to islands? Yeah, that whole water thing. And the Royal Navy is the most powerful fleet in the world. And they have over 300 ships, 100 combat ships. Most are small vessels, but they don't need big ones. And Washington's going to make so many mistakes. When the British arrived under a general by the name of Howe, the admiral of the fleet was Howe too, they were brothers. He camped first on Staten Island, and what Washington did, and it's such a bad move. He goes from Manhattan Island to Long Island. If he's trapped on the island, and makes a line here on Brooklyn Heights. Now it's literally the borough of Brooklyn. I mean, if you go there, I walked around, there's a couple like plaques, but they're right in the middle of some, the borough of Brooklyn has 3 million people in it. So you don't really get any idea of the battle. You just see a couple little plaques saying there was a battle there. But I wanted to go to Brooklyn for lots of reasons, but that was one of them. But right here. And he always made little mistakes because he wasn't used or trained to organize large armies. So, for example, here he did something he did at 4 other battles. He left his men here and never protected his flank. He was just happy to get the guys lined up. And so when the British arrived, over 30,000 British troops under General Howe, what he did is he attacked their line, but not wiped them out, just attacked them. So all of Washington's troops are facing in this direction, would be east, kind of southeast. And then he sent 15,000 men around through these little passes that Washington never defended, he just didn't do it, and attacked in the rear. Can you imagine what the militia did when all of a sudden 10,000 trained redcoats with fixed bayonets come charging over here? Yeah, they ran as fast as they could. The battle was a rout. The Battle of Long Island, that we lump together as kind of the battles of New York, but this is a big one. Washington came within minutes of losing everything. The only thing that saved Washington and the revolution, night. It got dark. And the British couldn't control their men anymore, and that allowed Washington to escape to here. But he's stuck. Now, this happened at the end of August. So the 27th was the battle. The next day, how the British commander didn't attack. Can you imagine how felt? Sorry about that. He thought, it's over. I can finish this thing any once. So he gave a day to bring up reinforcements. That night, Washington, he knows it. If Washington can't escape, it's done. And the plan was for the next morning, on the 29th of August, the British were going to attack and wipe out Washington's army and end the revolution right there. And the Declaration of Independence would probably become a footnote in British history. It really was that close. Now, what it's going to be known as eventually, the miracle of Kips Bay. The miracle of Kips Bay. On the 28th, 29th, that night, it was rough seas, and the channel, what we call the East River, was really narrow. And so the British, their Navy, Admiral Howe, didn't put any ships here. All it would have taken are a couple of small ships, frigates, and Washington could not have crossed. But rough seas, we'll get them in the morning. Didn't put any ships there. And members of the Continental Army, they were actually sailors, worked on whaling boats, rowed 9,000 men across the East River that night and saved Washington's army. If they would have put just a couple ships there, the war would have ended the next day.
So who rode them across?
They're just Washington soldiers. And Washington, this is not one you have to write down, but to give you an idea how Washington, things just, he never commanded an army like this. He was ill prepared in a lot of ways, even though he did have signs of a great leader. They're in New York, and he knows he can't hold it. Now, one of the things he should have done is burn the wharves in the harbor so the British can't use it. He forgot. Literally, you're riding away, and Washington's like, should have burned those. Accidentally, the British burned them themselves.
No, instead of not coming back.
Yeah, there's
Like 2 people died to burn that.
They totally forgot. Now, you will need to write these 2 battles down, but one at Harlem Heights up here, named after a Dutch town, and one at White Plains. Washington's army was defeated, but both times Washington could pull back. So what you need to know is this. Washington was decisively defeated, but the British allowed him to escape. The British would have acted aggressively like that right there, gone for the jugular, they could have won the war right there. And I'm not kidding, a totally different course of history. It's Harlem Heights and White Plains up here, but all you need to know, and they fought better. And then the British let Washington slip across the Hudson and escape across New Jersey towards Philadelphia. Winter is coming, and the British let him go. They decide, we'll finish him off. The war is over, we'll finish him off next spring. I can't even describe how bad this defeat was. The Continental Congress panicked. What statesman, one of the authors of the Declaration of Independence, wanted Washington to be the commander? John Adams. By September, John Adams is demanding that Washington be fired and replaced with a former British officer named Charles Lee, who would turn out to be totally incompetent. Thankfully, that didn't happen. It happened one more time down the road. Everything was falling apart. The only thing that saved him was the simple fact that the British let him go. And so, as Washington flees across New Jersey, let me quick draw you. I know, now I'm going to draw you now. You excited?
Yes.
You don't seem as excited as you should be. Excited? Half-hearted. Trying to make them feel better, aren't you?
No.
So, I'm going to tell who's been in New Jersey. Not all of us have. All right, so this, let me draw the rivers. Hudson River.
Okay.
Delaware River. Very straight rivers in the east. Down here is Philadelphia, on the other side of the Delaware. That's where the Continental Congress is. They're freaking out. New York up here. The British went into winter camp. But along the road where Washington escaped, there's no bridge, so along the road to a ford and then down to Philadelphia. Think of a road, it's more like 2 wagon runs. You know, there weren't real roads. And over the rivers, they had to find a ford. And that's why here, there's a little town here called Trenton. Along this, the British put a few troops and let Washington escape. But as Washington escaped, his army literally bled away. Men were deserting and had enough. So he went from over 10,000 when the battles began. When he crossed the Delaware, Washington had less than 1,000 men. No winter gear, almost no food, no winter quarters, just kind of hastily built little huts. And the army is falling apart. I mean, they are barely holding on. Once again, I repeat, if the British would have acted aggressively there, and war would have ended. Not only did the British not act aggressively, but they stuck little garrisons in the towns along the way, and in the farthest outpost, they didn't even put British troops. They were mercenaries that the king paid the king of a little principality in Germany called Hesse, that have come down in history as the Hessians. And the last thing, Hessians are Germans. That's not pronouncing them correctly, but I'll give you the English spelling of it. Got that? What? Get the Hessians. And think about mercenaries for a second. They're unhappy. They're not getting money. The king got money. So I'll finish this tomorrow. That's beautiful. Not quite as good as mine, but. Oh, Max, thank you. Everybody, I'm sorry. Please rip your map off carefully. Put your name on them. Sorry about that. Thank you for reminding me. I totally forgot. You're good people. Well, maybe not the best, but you're up there the top 2 in this conversation. Beautiful, beautiful. You have cartography skills too. Did you not read? Yes. Huh? Oh yeah, you're trying to mix everything up. I'll tell you what you're gonna do. You won't get full credit, you want to do it tomorrow. You're responsible for everyone. You won't get full, but I'll give you some. Okay?
How do you feel
my name.
Hi.
How may I help you?
It's like it's okay. Yeah. Oh my God.
And if we all would, if the quiz will visually fine.
Like, no, I was thinking about like the author of yes, like whatever that is.
Quit ranting.
That's what we have in your class to do. But the fact that he talked about it.
What class are you ranting about?
AP,
Oh,
we were discussing.
it's all made up.
It's true. It is all.
Yeah, literature made up.
It's all a societal construct. It's like money.
That's, you're right, it's Mr. Irby, right? So you're right above me.
We are.
Yeah,
That's why we
so
get
you
it.
can hear us like yelling at
Oh, I'm stopping the broadcast.